It's Erin Anderson with the Erin Anderson Betrayal Trauma Coaching. I am super excited that you have tuned in today. Let's get talking about how to heal from betrayal trauma. Welcome back to another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle. And we have with us today a fabulous guest. Marquel Brown and I have become recent but really good friends. And I've listened to her story and what she's trying to do as well. And I'm not going to spoil any of it for you guys because I know Marquel can definitely tell it way better than I can. But she's here to help betrayal trauma victims. She herself has experienced betrayal trauma, but she is not just a survivor, she's a thriver from it. She's found some beautiful, beautiful ways to heal. And as you guys have seen from the title of this podcast, she's went from being, in the jalapeno relationship to moving it down into a much more cooling position. And so I'm going to kind of step aside today. I'm going to let her kind of share her story. And obviously give you guys some content and some discussion because I really feel like Marquel is going to give you guys just a fantastic episode today. So welcome, Marquel.
Thank you, Erin. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And although my story is pretty horrific, I really am excited about this work, helping women who have gone through betrayal trauma and providing them hope that they can heal and recover and they can regain that spark of life and go from that victim to survivor into thriver.
Yeah, absolutely. And, from thriving to, confidence and believing in yourself and loving yourself to the point where you set really good boundaries no matter what. And like and people have heard me on this podcast talk about like the jalapeno, right? And how I'm like most of the time when you get into in a relationship with a jalapeno, right? Most of the time those women end up leaving that relationship. And I'm not saying, and I still won't say, that you guys need to stay in that relationship, right? Because to me, I really feel like personal safety is key, and we don't want people to consistently be injured from, the jalapeno in a physical way. But your story is a very different one.
Yeah. And I really like that word jalapeno because that's what it felt like. Everything was always on fire, and it seemed like everything that I would do just didn't make a difference. It didn't help. Cleaning the house and having that perfect, having dinners ready, making sure the kids are all set. And so actually, it has been just right at 10 years since my D-Day, which mine did involve domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And it was horrible, and it still brings heaviness, although I can talk about it and I don't really need to go into any of the specifics.
Yeah.
And I also want to share that I really haven't talked about this a whole lot with very many people. My therapist, my bishop, I've shared it with you, I've shared it with a few people because most of the time when people are involved in domestic violence, there is a lot of shame
Yeah.
given towards the abuser and as well as the victim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the regards of the abuser, I knew that when all of this happened, that I wanted to save my marriage. I wanted to save my family. I had no idea in that moment how that was possible. And what I have learned over these past years is that when we do yoke with Christ, when we utilize the atonement of Jesus Christ, all things can be possible, even the impossible, even when we don't see any way out or how is it ever going to improve. And that is my message of hope is that if we can yoke with Christ, we really can overcome those seemingly impossible things. And it was a very, very long journey. And I was definitely shattered and broken. And I was injured. I was physically abused and I was severely injured. And that in itself, when you have the betrayal anyway, where the one that you love turns on you or does something that is totally out of alignment of their values and your own values, and I had no clue with that. So whether it's domestic violence or pornography or somebody having an affair, most people have no clue with how to move forward. Um, and with the physical injury, that magnified everything,
Mm.
because even if I was trying to work on my mental and my thoughts, and that physical pain was such a constant reminder, actually for years for me.
Yeah. So here's my question then for you, because you and I have both chatted about this a little bit before. So when somebody is dealing with like this is such a very, very close line, to walk. How do you know, like with when you're dealing with the jalapeno and you've dealt with that physical violence, right? How do you like how do you tell someone to stay in the marriage and keep going when that's happened?
Well, I'm a bit stubborn because I didn't know what to do, and I had my whole family, and I wouldn't recommend this, although I know it happens probably more often than most people are aware of. I tried to navigate it myself for, I think it was about 9 or 10 months. And then things started escalating and ramping up and ramping up and ramping up again. And I was like, whoa, I've got to have help. I can't do this again. I can't be hurt again, for one thing.
Hmm.
And I still was trying to heal from the previous injury. And so I did reach out. And that, of course, opens up a whole other can of worms. Um, and I will say, and we finally found a therapist, because I did say to my husband, we have got to get some help. It's not getting better. Well, I did find a therapist, and we have to be really careful with who you get for your therapist, because this was not a good match for betrayal trauma. In fact, I found myself again, the therapist saying, you're just going to have to get over it. You're just going to have to forgive him. And he had her wrapped around her little finger. I was just like, okay, really? And so then I felt like, okay, we need the therapy. I've got my husband to therapy, and this is not a good situation. And it was a lot of prayer and guidance. And I think the Lord just put things in my path, that led me to a therapist that really knew about betrayal trauma. And going back to that safety piece, he really had to work hard on me not saying anything, walking away, being aware of my husband's body language and cues when he would come home, or if I was trying to talk with him, because there was a lot of gaslighting and stonewalling where I would ask and he would pretend like he didn't hear me, or he'd ignore me, or he'd look the other way, or he would totally go into gaslighting and turn it back on me, whatever it was. And that took probably quite a few months for me to stop, walk away, and then learning how to use those self-care tools, because I was one of those moms, you just give, 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 right? And I did do things. I'm into music and I have animals and I like to go outside, but a lot of times it was just really a lot with my kids, or working, or doing household things. So learning that self-care and learning um, the boundary to keep me safe, because my therapist knew that I was still in danger because my husband was so volatile. He just was not good at regulating his emotions, and everything was my fault. And So my learning to walk away, even leave the house if I needed, um, took a lot of practice and a lot of self mastery on my own part, a lot of working on regulating myself and knowing that I can only control me as much as I really wanted to, have him be different. And again, before this all happened, before everything that led up to that day, I was trying to do everything, even like sacrifice myself to make him happy, and nothing happened. Nothing worked, is what I'm trying to say, because, well, as we all know, the only one that can help us to be happy is ourself, and turning to God. Your spouse or your partner cannot make you happy.
Right. Yeah, it's true. You can't make decisions for someone else. You can't create happiness for someone else. Like none of that works. It's absolutely true. And but at the same time too, like if you're sitting in, that and you know this because and we'll be talking with you further also about like healing the nervous system, right? But the thing is we get stuck in the amygdala, and the amygdala is telling us that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, and so we're getting stuck in that cycle.
Mhm.
And what you're saying here is that's exactly where you were at, right? In the beginning of this whole situation, that fawn response, where
Mhm.
if I walk on eggshells, if I just step in the exact right spaces, then he'll stay calm. And this sounds so incredibly familiar for women who are dealing with, domestic violence. And to be like full disclosure, I actually don't coach a lot of them. And the reason why is because I personally feel like they need deeper support than what I can give. So like with I work a lot with women whose husbands are the mild and the medium, right? But the jalapenos, they definitely need support too. So what I'm hearing you say is like number one, like let's start leaning on Christ, right? We've really got to lean on Christ to the point where he can tell us whether it's safe to stay or to go.
Right.
But the second thing is to also get some good support for yourself,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Um, because that support and like and you're not the only one who I've heard has said like, I've gone to a therapist and they told me that I just needed to get over it or that it was my fault or something. And it's like, who is training these therapists? Like, seriously?
Right.
Why? Why would you say that to a victim? Like, why?
Right
Right?
in front of their spouse. So then
Right?
therefore it's all my fault again.
Right?
It was
Why?
horrible.
Why would you do that? Why?
And
Anyway, there's a lot of really good therapists out there too, and you found the good one too.
I
And
did.
so like it's such a really interesting story, and getting that support, getting the help you need, connecting to your savior, hearing him is so key. But I also found it really interesting when you said that I needed to leave when I needed to leave, right?
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if that might be one of the keys to know actually if you can stay or to go. Like, how was it leaving? Because I know like a lot of women who try to leave and say, I need to go take a break. It's not possible for them with a jalapeno.
Right. And I did run into that. Trying to leave the house, probably in the beginning, it wouldn't have even been safe for me to try to leave.
Hmm.
So it was usually safe for me to go to another room, go outside for a walk in the backyard. And I think one of the hardest, and I just feel like I'm finally putting even more pieces together over the past 6 months as I've been learning more. I think a couple of key things, well, there's so many key things with being able to actually put a boundary, with being able to leave. And of course, this was years for us. is being able to create safety. You have to have some safe places, some safe people to go to. And sadly, when I first started out, I did not have safe people
Right.
because they told me all the wrong things. Because just despite that one therapist, who this definitely was not her expertise, other areas I'd turn. You get the, well, you just need to give them more sex. You just
Mm,
need to, you must have done something to make them mad. Like, no, you're trying to
no.
calm down in the moment. And anybody that's been in these situations, most women have tried almost everything. And I will sadly say, even during some of those earlier years, I would even retaliate and yell back, and that didn't help at all. So I definitely learned, well, we don't do that one because that one's definitely not going to shift. So, um, and there's so much gaslighting,
Hmm.
and your self-worth is so shattered, and they make it sound like it's all your fault and you're the problem. And they will tell you, well, you didn't do that, or you know what, you never said that to me, or all these things that make you doubt yourself so much. It's creating that safety where you can hear and see and think clearly. I think that's where support groups are really helpful, groups where you can work on your own processing as well as learn the tools for self-care, rebuilding your self-worth and that self-confidence, remembering who you are, and that God does love you. He does not expect you to stay in an abusive relationship. And I'm really grateful that we're hearing that more in general conference talks. We don't
Yeah.
have
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
abuse. And so, although even my therapist was like, you need to leave, you need to go somewhere else, there's so much fear around being hurt again. And I had little kids at the time. And my thought was, although he'd never been abusive to the kids or hurting them, it was me.
Mm,
Um, I was like, okay, if I leave them, the kids are going to be there and he's mad. And what if something happened? And then I would feel guilty. And so I had this pull where I was like, how do I leave? And I have all of these kids. I had 6 children, you know, and how do you get all 6 out at the same time, without him trying to come between that? And so I was surviving a lot of the times. And um, so there's so many things. The other thing that I found in the beginning, when everywhere I turned, it was so unsafe, and I even had reached out to a therapist, and that was absolutely horrible. It's like, wow, I don't even know what to do. Like, I'm reaching out for help, and I'm getting all these hurtful things said
blamed.
to me,
Yeah.
and yeah, and like there was no safety. That was not
Right.
safe, and
Right.
so then you again doubt yourself. And Um, so I did turn to Christ because I was like, okay, I don't know how to do this, but I know that, you know, if I, that you'll help me. Thankfully, I had a foundation, and also in my healing, really anchoring to Christ every day with my prayers and my scripture study and reading a conference talk or listening to it, journaling, because I felt like that was putting my armor on every day so that I
Yeah.
could navigate all the attacks that were coming at me, because that this was just one area, and it was like multiple of my communities, my homeschool community. It was like there was a lot of opposition there. Um, even in some arenas of the church community, I was like, wow, I'm trying to do good things, and there's just this opposition. So I really felt like I was under
Attack.
intense attack by
Yeah.
everything. There wasn't much safety other than what I created myself.
Wow.
So then, with therapy, what I was learning was, if I could keep myself in alignment and in line with my values, keep myself calm in those jalapeno situations, and walk away and do my self care, that definitely he would de escalate. Now, here we are 10 years later, and he has done some of his own work and some therapy and group. Um, when if I say, if he's getting heated, like, I can't talk anymore about this now, and I will walk away. He, we don't actually have a conversation about this yet. He is doing his own work in that time that we're taking a break. And it's so cool when we come back together that we actually can pick up where we left off and have a better conversation about whatever it was that we were talking about and be able to go forward. So, what I find with the basically just detaching from the contention is that then I don't have to clean up all the messes of the guilt and the shame and, have to heal from all the hurtful words or the blaming, and I'm not going to say that I'm perfectly innocent because I've had my own, fiery darts that I'm throwing with my
Mhm.
words as well. And then I don't have to feel bad about saying something that I'm like, why did I say that in the moment? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So uh, that's been a beautiful thing here, now where we're at, where we can take a break, come back, and we can move forward. And so the recovery, can be a few hours instead of like constant spin all the time for my brain at least.
Yeah.
And
I gotta say, how number one, kudos to you, but also kudos to your husband.
Mhm.
Like, can I would like seriously just give him a shout out for just a minute because you know there is a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame put on everybody in these situations, which is really kind of sad. And now, granted, we can kind of see too, like if somebody's out there hurting their wives, like that's not good. But here's your husband who literally has done some major work to cool himself down, right? And he is no longer doing those things. That's huge. That's huge. I mean, we're talking like Alma the Younger, Saul of Tarsus huge. Truly, you know? And like I really want to give him that shout out and give him some respect here because that is so hard to do. And and you look at the statistics, it doesn't happen very often.
No.
Once somebody gets into those mindsets and that anger and is the jalapeno, usually it's almost impossible for them. Like it's not impossible, but it feels impossible for them to move down to the medium and even the mild, right? And
Mhm.
here your husband has totally done that. But what I'm
Yes.
hearing you say, is it's also largely due to a lot of the work you yourself have done. And one of the things I talk about with my clients consistently is that if like you can't change another people. Wow. Where did I learn English? You cannot change another person, right? You cannot tell them what to think. You cannot tell them how to behave. You cannot tell them what to do, and you can't make them do anything. You can't.
Mm-mm.
But when you become influential and you start to heal and you start to grow and you start to change and become that influential person, you influence the change,
Mhm.
right? And here you are, you've done like all of these things to change yourself. And we're not talking about in guilt and in shame. You're saying, no, I decided to change myself for me. Not because I wanted my husband to do a certain thing, not because I wanted my kids to do a certain thing, not because I was changing to try to manipulate the situation. I was changing for me. I had my back. And I think that that is key, especially in this situation, because a lot of times women, they're like, it's all my fault. I got to change. I got to do this because they're in that fawn response, right? And it does cause the whole situation to get worse. When you decided to do things for you, to do the self care, to have your own back, Even though sometimes it was a little bit shaky and a little bit unstable, you still did it little bit by little bit, staying within that safety realm, right? And you're saying that everything changed.
Did. Yeah. And I have to add one more thing in there, that it wasn't just about changing me, really, although I worked so hard to make sure I stayed in alignment with my values,
Hmm.
fought to always have the spirit to be with me. And if I didn't, then I needed to walk away and go so I could get regrounded, so I could be feeling the spirit again. And the other thing was, and this is before President Nelson's Think Celestial,
Hmm.
I would ask, okay, wait, why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep staying here? And I really kept saying, because I want to make it to the celestial kingdom. So I had that think celestial there. That's what I was fighting for. I wanted to save my marriage. I wanted to save my family. I knew that the Lord loved my husband, even though he was in a pretty horrible spot.
Yeah.
And I knew he loved me. And I believed in the power of the atonement of Christ, and that can heal all of the things that we're going through, whatever challenge that is, whether it's shifting from that jalapeno volatile to the mild, or whether it's working on being on time, or, following through with what you said. I mean, we all
Yeah.
are working on things. And so I knew he was valued in God's eyes, and I was. And even though I didn't know how to bring us together, that is what I would focus on Christ. I'd focus on Christ. Okay. And my favorite scripture is, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And so if my head was just swimming, I would just go on autopilot with that. And I'd say that over and over and pretend like I was focusing on Christ, because it was really painful and hurtful and hard. Uh, and then I found a quote that I was like, I love this, because this is another witness of hope if we can
Yeah.
work on ourselves, from Elder Christofferson. And he said, if individually we each put on Christ, then together we can hope to become one. And so I think that when we do focus on Christ, and we are doing our work, and we are striving to become like Christ and learn of him and be like him, that's where we start to see those miracles. And we can find that peace in Christ, which that peace in Christ song is so beautiful.
Hmm.
And
I love that
we
one.
have to not forget. I see so many, not so many, well, maybe I do. I've had some friends, though, who have totally withdrawn and, disconnected from Christ and church and everything, and their lives have just spun out of control and crashed. And so each time when I think, sometimes I was like, I just want to go do something bad because everything good I'm doing, I'm still having bad things happen. And thankfully, I stayed in alignment with my values, and I didn't do that, because I was like, well, I don't even know what I would do. So I guess I'll just keep trying to do good things, right? And watching these friends, and, you know, if you think your life is bad when you are doing all the good things and trying to stay close to God, I have watched as people disconnect. Many times their life spirals out of control, and it's
Yeah.
way worse. And so for me too, that was another reminder. Well, they did that. I don't want what happened to them. So I'm going to keep moving forward, keep anchoring into the promises that we're told in the scriptures, staying close to God. And then, now, um, we're to seek and expect miracles. And we have permission for that now. And I think in a way I was doing that. I kept going, well, these promises are here. If I just keep working on this, I don't know how this is going to happen and come together. And what I found with that, I come like little light switch moments. It's like little light switches. It would just flick on, because it'd be really bad and we're doing work and working on our recovery. And then a light switch would come on and it's better. And I'm like, well, how did that even happen? Well, that's the miracle right there, right?
Hmm.
As we keep doing our work, those tender mercies do come.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I want to take just a little quick pause because not all of our listeners are Latter-day Saints, right? A lot of our listeners come from other Christianity sects, and so when we're talking about like President Nelson and we're talking about General Conference and stuff like that, that's all like Latter-day Saint stuff, right? So when we're talking about this stuff, it comes from like our Latter-day Saint beliefs and stuff. But you can still like take so much of what is being said here, like whether you're Latter-day Saint or not, and connect this to your own personal beliefs, because all of our listeners are Christian, right?
Yes.
And when we connect to Christ, that is the greatest thing we can do for ourselves, for our families, for everything else that we're dealing with. And that is where we get the miracles, because this is totally a miracle. It is
Mhm.
absolutely a miracle. Like one of the greatest miracles is seeing massive, quick change in people. Like
Mhm.
that's one of the most beautiful miracles I can think of. It's happened in your home, right?
Yeah, it has. And I'm so
Beautiful.
grateful.
Yeah,
And you say quick. I guess in my whole lifetime, it's quick. 10 years seems like it was so long.
right. And I guess I should definitely, edit that. Well, not edit, but like explain that comment. Like, I'm thinking like Alma the Younger, Solitarsis, like it was going from like completely out to destroy Christianity to being like one of the greatest supporters for Christianity, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
And in just a matter of a few days is all it took for them. Now,
right.
granted, yes, 10 years is a long time, and I'm not going to suggest that somebody stick around for 10 years to see if they're going to be okay in their situations, right? I'm not suggesting that at all. But what I am saying is that the best thing we can do to become the influential, to call upon the miracles, is connect to Christ.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. Like, obviously I've not been through domestic violence. My husband, and we've definitely had our struggles and everything, but we have not been through, that type of problem in our relationship. However, what we have been through still had me turning towards Christ,
Mhm.
you know?
It was like my lifeline. And
Yes.
when there was nobody else there, even though I was reaching out, I could find that peace and comfort in Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was grateful for that.
I love it. So here's my question.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, just to kind of wrap things up here. What do you suggest for someone? Because, like I said, we're calling this podcast, cooling the jalapeno, right?
Yeah.
So what would you suggest for someone who is in that situation? You know, how does she know when to stay? How does she know when to go?
Mm.
And what are the things she must do to make sure that she stays safe no matter what?
Yeah. How to know to stay or go. You got to stay close to God. And you have to make sure you're safe. So if you're seeing signs in your husband that things are safe, okay, I can stay. If things are escalating and getting worse and not safe, you've got to go. And whether that's separated until he works on his self to calm down and cool down, or if that's divorce and that's between you and God. The other thing, lots and lots of self-care to rebuild yourself, to rebuild your self-esteem and your confidence and your worth, and remembering who you are, anchoring into your identity, and learning to regulate your nervous system, which we'll talk about it another time. That is
Mm-hmm.
going to be very important with learning to ground yourself, as well as learning that self mastery, that ability to, no matter what is going on, to stay within your values and stay calm. And as me, I had to learn to zip my mouth closed and walk away, because then I'm not feeding into the contention. I'm not adding to this whirlwind of emotions. I'm disconnecting in that moment. And if you can have a few brief statements like, you know what, I think we need to take a break and talk about this later. Or you could even say, I'm not doing very well. Now, if they're like not going to let you walk away, you can always pull out the, I've got to go to the bathroom. Most people will not say that you can't go to the bathroom. And so then you can calm down in there, have some time away there, um, have an escape plan ready, where your keys and your purse are and your phone, and you are able to just grab it and leave if you need. And I find that you have to practice this over and over of what you're going to do in those heated situations, so that you have that mental preparation before. So when it happens, you have your plan, which is your safety plan to create safety for yourself, to walk away, whether it's the bedroom or to go for a walk or to leave the house, so that you are not put in danger under any situation. Because when you've added in that physical injury, it just magnifies everything for healing and recovery at between with yourself and with your spouse. So at all costs, keep yourself safe. And I hear women sometimes say, if he would just hit me, then I'd have an excuse to leave. And I'm an example of, I did not leave. So most of the time, I don't know what the statistics is, but many women still don't leave. So just because they hit you and you've got a bruise doesn't mean that you're going to leave. So you need to, okay, safety, boundaries, and all of these things are processes as you work your own recovery. And one of the non-negotiables is, no violence. And that's like a deal breaker. And I even know that for myself when I say that. And you have to create safety at all costs. Avoid any situation of physical injury at all
Yes.
costs.
Yes. I agree. And you mentioned a couple other really interesting points here, and I want to say key points. And I think this is going to also be very telltale, whether you can stay, whether you need to go, any of that kind of stuff when it comes to your jalapeno husband. And number one is the fact that you were still able to at least walk away to the bathroom.
Mhm,
You know, sometimes the jalapeno will follow to the bathroom, and like he's just going to hurt someone, right?
mhm.
I
Yes.
I think if the jalapeno shows some restraint, that's a good thing. You know
And
what
they
I
don't
mean?
always.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's where my therapist worked with me to not get to that point at all. And I would watch the body language of my spouse. And if he was doing any of those things, like ignoring me or looking away or gaslighting or minimizing, that I did not engage any further. I would turn and walk away. And that took me a lot of self mastery and time to actually get to that point. Because I kept thinking, well, if I just try a little harder, no, he is not in a place. He does not want to talk to you. And I would have to actually just walk away and have my plan of what I would go do, because it's really hard to do that. Again, it took
yeah,
a lot of practice. And so navigating those signs that you have noticed that lead up to those volatile situations, so that you don't get to that. If any of this is happening, you either leave or go to your safe place. You have the separation if you think that there would be any following or restraint. And these are um, the traits and signs that lead up to that. Then you just leave. And
hmm
what happens is they either then shift and be like, oh, okay, well, I need to figure this out because I do want her here with me. Or things will continue to escalate, which is another sign that okay, then you stay away. You stay at a safe distance.
And that might
And
mean leaving.
yeah, and you
Yeah.
don't come back until they're calm and until they have the tools to help them to regulate. Because otherwise it is dangerous and
Yes.
it is not fun.
Yeah. But it's something I gotta tell you, I'm so glad you came on to the podcast because I do feel like this is something that needs to be talked about a lot more. And you're gonna hear my little girl in the background. Sorry, guys. She's 2. She doesn't understand, boundaries yet. But it is really, really important that we do understand the differences. That this is something that does need to be talked about. That this is something that needs to be shared because too often like I know a few years ago there was a lady in my community that was killed by her boyfriend, right? Because of the domestic violence. And had she have been able to know what the signs are, I think that would be really key. So, actually, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to come back and also do a podcast about the signs to watch for with the jalapeno?
Yes.
Because I think that's going to be key. Okay.
I
So
love
we're
that.
we're going to have Marquel back for sure, everyone. Because I do feel like this is something that is very key, something that needs to be discussed.
Mhm.
Um, and how to calm down the jalapeno and how to navigate that whole situation. So she'll be back. We're also going to be talking with her eventually about how to calm the nervous system and heal the nervous system. So, yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff coming up with Markel.
Great. I'm excited. Thank you. And I hope this is helpful to all those listeners. You know, hopeful for how to generate safety, as well as hopeful that there is help and there is hope for people to recover if they will do the work
Mm-hmm.
and show up for themselves as well as for their spouse.
Truly, totally. Well, Markel, thank you so much for coming back with us. You guys pay attention to the podcast. She will be with us again. And then also let us know if you guys have some questions that either I or Markel can answer for you. And until the next time, guys, we will see you on the other side.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and listening in on this podcasting episode. Don't forget to tune in next week. It's gonna